When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about kind of my defense for the last two A Song of Ice and Fire books. So that'll be Feast for Crows and then Dance with Dragons. This video was kind of inspired by a video I had seen on my recommended. I usually have two YouTube channels. So one is where I don't post on it. It's just the one where I have all my like not subscribers, but things I'm subscribed to and all that stuff. And then I have the other one, which is this one where I check comments and stuff. So I was logging into this account and I was checking your guys' comments and stuff. And I saw videos, the first one, and it was like why I won't be watching the new Game of Thrones like spinoff, and then why I won't be reading Winds when it comes out. And I didn't know this was a thing because I feel like for most people, if you don't like A Song of Ice and Fire, it starts with the first like book or two just because you don't like the themes, you don't like kind of the darker and more realistic tone that George has, or his kind of way of describing things. It's kind of like Tolkien where it's very descriptive and stuff like that. That would turn you off from these books, or maybe even the mature content, maybe. And I feel like if you don't like A Song of Ice and Fire, you would know right from the beginning, right? But this person argues, because they were doing a review of the books, that the real reason they don't like it is because of the last two. So in this video, I'm going to kind of go through why I really don't think there was any type of dip of quality in those two books. It's just they're two different books, right? They're more of peacetime and the ability of people to be able to rule and the struggles of that compared to the first three books, which were preparing for war, war, and war. So, yeah. Before we get into the video, if you guys would like to subscribe, like, and comment for more videos like this, please do help the channel grow and reach other people that might like this content. And, yeah. So, getting into this. So, Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, like I said before, they're two very different books. First of all, these two books, right, are separated, as in we don't have all of our POVs for this time period in one book. When you're reading Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, you're really supposed to read them together, right? So, as many people have suggested, you read one chapter from one book, then you read the next from the other book. It kind of helps with the whole time situation with those two books, right? And that's something when I read the books for the first few times, I never did, right? I always just read them in chronological order of release, and I never really had problems. I understood that these are supposed to happen during around the same times. Now, I will say, in this reread that I'm doing right now, I'm currently in A Storm of Swords. I am going to be doing it that way, where I'm going to read one chapter and then one chapter from the other book, because I feel like it'll keep the content more fresh when you're reading those two books, because, you have a lot of the side kind of characters, side plots, and then you have your mainstream characters like Dany, Jon, Tyrion, but you also have like these side things like the Greyjoys, all that going on, which is super interesting. The Dornish kind of plot going on right now. You have a really good mix. And the reason I think a lot of people, may not like Feast is because we don't have a lot of the main characters, right? Feast for Crows is my least favorite book, but like I said when I ranked the books, I like all the books. I don't really think there is a bad book in the series. I think that very much the series is personal opinion, what you like better, what plots you like better. Because for me, I can see definitely why you would like A Feast for Crows, right? You go away from all these mainstream plots, right? And we kind of get to see some new characters. We learn a lot more about world building. Feast for Crows does a really good job of world building even more. I would say this is probably the first or second book when it comes to world building. The first one kind of has to be almost number one because it introduces you into literally everything and it does a really good job. But Feast for Crows takes you into a more in depth of the Greyjoy culture, the Iron Islands, into the Dornish culture that we were kind of introduced with Oberyn, and really takes those plots, really does a really good job with them. We also see, like Samwell's plot in this, where we're seeing, kind of him and Bravos, stuff like that. So, as well as Sam and Bravos, we also get to see Arya and Bravos and kind of her faceless training, which again is done much better in the books than in the show. But the person that I had been watching this video, why I wanted to bring this up, that they thought that George had got inherently worse at writing these last two books. And I really don't see that at all. I'm not sure where he's talking about that in. Maybe he doesn't like the style of kind of the books or whatever. I am going to leave the person's like video in the description. And again, it is his personal opinion. Like, this is my personal opinion. But for me, George's writing didn't get any worse, my opinion. I think the themes of what he wrote about changed. Or maybe not changed, but we started to see really but like what he wanted to talk about, right? A Song of Ice and Fire is more about the problems of war and why war is not good. So you see that we're finally through this wartime, and and he shows the struggles of keeping peace and not getting to that point of war. Especially back in medieval times, war was always it was a normal thing. Conquest and stuff like that was a normal thing. And we even see that really after the War of the Five Kings is more or less over. I mean, Stannis is still alive at this point, but again, not really in a position to go for the throne at this point. He's still tied up in the north and Dance with Dragons as well. George kind of shows us how Cersei Lannister struggles to kind of rule and keep power in King's Landing. We also see this later on in Dance with Dragons with Jon and Daenerys. And I really like this change of pace. Because what I feel like is going to happen with the books, and it's just kind of how it's going to happen, is we have the 3 books, which are more about war. We have the 2 in the middle, which I feel like are going to be our break, right? They're our break where we have a little bit of peacetime and a lot of building up to the next, books, right? Because if you look at what the first book was really about introducing the story as well as starting up the war. It was really like that kind of tension right before the war. And that's what I feel like this book, because it was supposed to only be one book, right? Feast and Dance with Dragons is supposed to be one book. This realistically is Game of Thrones. Just again, it's restarting, kind of building up all these plots and the tension and this, all this fighting that we're going to see in the next 2 books, right? Because if you think about it, right, this last book, with Dance with Dragons was a lot of Stannis preparing for war again, and then in Winds with Winter, we're gonna see him go into war again. Fight for Winterfell, the fight for maybe the Dawn and stuff like that, with the others coming across the wall and stuff like that. Um, we also see things like Daenerys, right? A lot of this was kind of her ruling in Marine for a while, trying to understand how to do this. A lot of people think, hey, she's gonna be at least starting her advance into Westeros in Winds of Winter at some point, whether that's her conquering still in Essos, or if that is her just coming over to Westeros. And then we also have, Fagon who's invading at this point, Westeros as well. There's a lot of war stuff going on in the next 2 books. So I feel like George does this to kind of change up the pace a little bit and switch it up. Again, the writing for me is really good in these 2 books, as in world building. It does a great job of, again, exploring areas and even previous areas that we've been to, just exploring on them even more with, people like Jaime and Brienne and the Riverlands and stuff like that. I think these 2 books really do a great job of that. Now, what I will say is these 2 books do not have the highs, the big payoffs that the, other 3 books had. But to me, that's okay. Every book doesn't need to have those big highs. And even in this book, there still are a lot of big time highs and reveals. Jon, getting killed at the end of Dance, right? That's a huge thing, for book readers, right? First reading these books, you didn't know that that was going to happen. If you're someone in the show, maybe it's not as big because Jon's going to die. But Jon dying is a huge thing because in the books, you don't know if he's going to be revived. I think a lot of people believe he's going to through ghosts and stuff like that. But that's a huge, big payoff and stuff like that. You have Cersei, where she has the Walk of Atonement, kind of getting her comeuppance for the last book of just bad decisions and stuff like that, arming the Faith Militant and all that type of stuff. And then, we see kind of Daenerys maybe getting the Dothraki at this point, all that stuff. And she leaves with Drogon after, not being able to control the dragons for this whole time. There are a lot of payoffs in this book. And I think one of the more underrated chapters within the entire books is actually the last chapter we've been given in Dance with Dragons, where we see Varys. We get the point of view, or not the point of view of Varys, sorry. We get the point of view of Kevin Lannister, right? And we kind of see, Varys come into play and how he's still kind of just creating chaos, and how he kills Pycelle as well as Kevin Lannister. I think that's a fantastic chapter and a great way to end that book. leading into the next one where, Aegon, is trying to conquer King's Landing and stuff, which I think he will. I definitely I kind of see where people don't like these two books. Like for me, they are my, lowest two books, but they're still very good books. Like I would put them up against most other books. I just think in such a fantastic series, I think for me, they just rank lower. And with that being said, I know a lot of people like Feet as one of their top two books. I've seen it in the comments when I did my own like ranking of the books. So I don't know. It's weird ideas, and I think if you look at kind of where some storylines go, I think George does a great job of setting up plots that eventually come to a head where characters are meeting each other and characters are going to be having conflicts within this next book. Now, with that being said, I can see the people that don't want to get into this series not finished. It's There's a good chance it won't even be finished in general because of George's age right now. Winds has still not been released, and we still have to wait for another book. I think what most of the fans that are hoping for this to come out is that he's taking so long with Winds because he's trying to plan out A Dream of Spring as well, so that when he releases Winds, hopefully Dream of Spring comes out relatively soon after, just because of how much he had to think about that book as well. But yeah, so looking at all those things, I can see why people, would be afraid to kind of get into this series, but I do think, this is probably, I think it's my favorite book series of all time. I mean, I do a whole YouTube channel about it, so I'm pretty sure it is. Lord of the Rings is good, but Lord of the Rings has its problems as well. But I mean, I think the movies did a great job of depicting that, which we would have gotten that kind of love towards our series, Game of Thrones, but we did not. So, But getting back to the books, I think this introductory of all these minor characters that kind of are starting to come into that maybe major character role is really good. It builds a lot of intrigue going into the next book. The creation of Euron as a villain, a very intriguing character. Him trying to kind of be a god almost, it seems like, doing these weird rituals and stuff like that. Really intriguing to see where George can go with him, and also create, this idea that maybe Euron is the one that brings down the wall, trying to be this godly figure, and really he releases pretty much the god of death almost onto Westeros. That's a really intriguing plot as well. Victarion's a really cool POV that was introduced. I actually really like Victarion. I know a lot of people don't like his POV chapters that much, but I think it's a really good insight into kind of the Ironborn's mentality and stuff like that, because we never really got that too much. Like Theon, we got his chapters, but he really wasn't an Ironborn. He really had like he was more of a Stark. We saw the Ironborn kind of trying to take over within him, but he's not like a naturally Ironborn person where he's been living with all these ideals for so long, like Victarion. So I think it's really good to understand kind of their culture through Victarion. Also, talking about chapters that people don't like. Some people don't like Marine chapters with Dany. And to a degree, I'm not a Dany fan. I can see what you're talking about, but I still think her chapters are pretty good. I mean, I think my problems are not the problems that a lot of people have with her chapters, if they have problems with them at all, even though she is a fan favorite, is that she kind of, I guess, the ruling part of Marine is kind of boring and stuff, and just kind of wanted to go to Westeros. But it's like, I feel like these are important skills for Dany to learn, and I think Dany trying to free the slaves is a really good cause and stuff like that. And trying to overturn this tradition of slavery and stuff is really cool. It's kind of like Reconstruction in American history, where we have all these conflicting ideals of how to really integrate, equality for all into, a society that's not like that. And I think that's really a good parallel for what's going on in Marine, where Danny's trying to just upheave this tradition of slavery, which has been there for, how long, just kind of end it. Really interesting to see how she deals with that and the struggles of really trying to fix that system, because as you see, some people actually benefited from slavery and stuff like that, and it's a really difficult thing to heave it just like that. And I think it is a very interesting plot for Daenerys. Like I'm more interested in Daenerys's plot in this book, like in the later books with Marine, than I kind of am with her in all of Clash, because a lot of Clash is kind of her just wandering around and then finds the city, and then I don't know, it's just kind of her begging for stuff, which, again, you're not wrong. It fits her character and stuff. I just don't find it that intriguing. But like I mean, I don't have any problems with Dany's chapters. The only problems I have with Dany's chapters is, she's a younger girl and stuff, and she's always thinking about Dario and stuff, which again fits her character. I just, not a fan. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other things people would have complaints with Feast for Crows and Dance. Again, I think they're really good books. Let me know down in the comments what your guys' problems are with those books or why you really love those books. Because for me, I don't really see why those books get so much hate. Um, Especially Dance, I feel like people. I've also seen people that I feel like these are mainly show watchers that go from the show to the books and don't like the way George handled Tyrion's character. Where I really like how George handles Tyrion's character. The show, he does all these like really terrible things, right? Like killing his father. Like, yes, us as an audience understands why he does it. Okay. As well as killing Shay. You understand why he does that. But at the same time, those are horrible things that you would probably have PTSD over and stuff like that. As well as then you factor in the books, you have this whole thing where we have this reveal that Jaime lied to Tyrion about Tysha and stuff. That is enough to make someone go nuts. I mean, like, just think about all that. So Tyrion coming out of this being a drunk, not really wanting to go on and stuff like that, and really being someone that is very negative now, it fits Tyrion as a character because he was always somebody that was kind of already a little negative and was kind of like a morally gray character. Making him go even further into his dark side because of events like this completely fits Tyrion's character. And then you have his journey then with, Jon Connington and Aegon. And I think the really good part of this is we still, even with Tyrion being in this horrible state, he still has a very smart mind and kind of puts together very quickly who Jon Connington and Aegon really are. Now, if Aegon really is a Targaryen, cool. If not, he's a Blackfire. I think that whole idea of, again, having Aegon be a Blackfire makes that story very intriguing. Kind of makes Varys even a better player of the game, right? Having this backup plan if Daenerys was to fail, which I think I made a whole video about Varys's plan if you guys want to watch that. But I think right now there's just so many options for Varys that he set himself up in a very good position if one of those does end up winning. But you continue on with Tyrion's character where they basically get kind of enslaved, and then he goes to the, Second Sons and all that, and then, we have basically the end of his chapters starting his chapters pretty much going to be him getting into Dany's like high court or whatever like that, or just kind of getting in there naturally because Dany really isn't there right now. So gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. I really think Tyrion's was handled pretty well books at this point. Maybe we could have sped along how quickly he gets to Dany. Maybe we could have just skipped over to like the stuff and just had him get to Marine be in the court already for Dany. But I don't know. I like the journey for Tyrion. I think it kind of reminds me of kind of his journey once he leaves the Vale to then getting to be the Hand of the King. I think that's kind of what this reminds me of. It's just kind of Tyrion getting a nice journey stuff because we've had Tyrion being, really deep into politics for the last 2 books at this point. So I don't know. I like to switch a pace for Tyrion's character. I like the character development. Giving him a character like Penny where they're trying to kind of build Tyrion back up to where he was before. Even though I think Tyrion could be that character that for a while could be like a devil on the shoulder of Dany's shoulder for a while, and then maybe he kind of becomes a better person. I don't know. Speaking of Aegon, by the way, talking in Tyrion's chapters, I think Aegon as well, getting to be kind of this new character that we see and being a force to rebel the Lannisters and Tyrells right now is a good idea. I talked about it earlier that he's a very intriguing character to me. Seeing if he is really a Targaryen or if he's a Blackfire, and kind of getting to just kind of figure that out as a reader. A really cool idea as well. For me, I really liked that, and that was one of my favorite plots when I first read Dance with Dragons. So for me, that is one of my most anticipated plots going into Winds, and I think it is for a lot of people. But another thing I really love with A Feast for Crows is that you also get, the Sansa Littlefinger stuff, which is it's just politicking, right? They took away Tyrion, right, as a kind of a politicking POV, and then gave you kind of Sansa with Littlefinger, where you get more of the politicking that you're going to be missing from Tyrion, which I think is really good. And I think the way we're seeing Littlefinger and Sansa deal with the lords of the Vale and stuff like that is really cool. And even going into this next book, is Littlefinger's plan really what he tells Sansa? I don't think it is, but maybe it is. We don't know. That's the beauty of A Song of Ice and Fire, is we can sit here and theorize for a while about what the plan is, and I just, it amazes me that people think that the writing got worse. The writing just did not get worse. In my opinion, it did not get worse. Maybe like how he describes stuff, or maybe, but like the overall plots, subplots of a lot of stuff going on stayed relatively good. It's just they have different themes. For everything in the north, again, really good. I mean, we see a bunch of plotting houses. I think the chapters with Davos and Wyman Manderley are fantastic and are some of my favorites of the last two books. But yeah, so thank you guys all for watching. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video, is why those two books kind of get unnecessarily hated on, just because they're kind of in peacetime and not a lot of wars going on and stuff like that. I think that's the big reason why those books get hated so much. Or as well, kind of the idea that they're kind of separated to where you kind of have to one chapter from each. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. Let me know what you guys think about Feet Dance. See you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.